Sarah Jenkins knew the temper of the Colorado Rockies better than she knew her own heart. She had spent 5 years as an ER nurse in Denver before burning out and retreating to this A-frame cabin in Silverton, seeking the kind of silence that only high altitude could provide. But tonight, the silence was aggressive. The mercury had dropped to 20 below, and the wind was clocking 60 miles per hour. It was a widowmaker storm, the kind the locals spoke of with a grim shake of their heads. Inside, the fire crackled in the stone hearth, fighting a losing battle against the drafts. Sarah pulled her wool cardigan tighter, checking the generator readings on her tablet. Fuel was good. Batteries were charging. She was safe. Then came the thud. It wasn't a branch snapping or snow sliding off the roof. It was a heavy, dull impact against the heavy oak of her front door, a human sound. Sarah froze, her hand hovering over her mug of tea. She waited. The wind screamed, masking everything. She moved to the window, scraping a circle in the frost. Nothing but swirling white darkness. She grabbed the heavy flashlight she kept by the mantel, and, after a moment's hesitation, the Sig Sauer P365 from the drawer. Living alone in the mountains required pragmatism, not paranoia. She unlocked the deadbolt and cracked the door. The wind slammed it inward, nearly knocking her off her feet. "Hello!" she shouted, squinting against the stinging ice. Nothing. She looked down. Half buried in the drift that had accumulated against her porch steps was a shape. A man. He was face down, wearing a long black trench coat that looked absurdly expensive and entirely insufficient for the weather. "Hey." Sarah shoved the gun into her waistband and dropped to her knees. She grabbed his shoulder and rolled him over. His face was a mask of blue-tinged porcelain. Ice crystals had formed on his eyelashes. He wasn't shivering, a bad sign. That meant he had passed the stage of violent shaking and was moving into severe hypothermia. His body was shutting down. "Come on," she grunted, hooking her arms under his armpits. He was heavy, dense with muscle. Sarah grit her teeth, digging her boots into the slick wood of the porch, and dragged, inch by agonizing inch. She pulled him over the threshold. She kicked the door shut, leaning her back against it to latch the deadbolt, breathing hard. The silence of the cabin returned, but the air felt charged now. She dropped to his side, her nurse training overriding her fear. "Can you hear me?" No response. She stripped off his wet coat. It was cashmere. Who wears cashmere in a blizzard underneath? He wore a bespoke charcoal suit, the kind she'd seen on venture capitalists in the city, but the tailoring was sharper, European. And then she saw the blood. A dark, wet stain was spreading across the crisp white dress shirt, just above the hip. "Gunshot," she whispered. She hesitated. The smart thing to do, the survivalist thing to do, was to verify he was disarmed. She patted him down quickly. A shoulder holster, empty. A knife in his boot, which she confiscated and slid across the floor. She had to get him warm, and she had to stop the bleeding. Sarah dragged him closer to the fire, grabbing the emergency kit she kept stocked like a mini trauma center. She cut open the shirt. The wound was a through and through, likely a 9mm. It had missed the major organs but nicked something vascular. The cold had actually helped. The vasoconstriction had slowed the bleeding. Warming him up might kill him if she wasn't careful. She worked for an hour, cleaning the wound, packing it, and stitching the skin with steady hands. She started an IV line with warm saline, something she kept for herself in case of dehydration, and wrapped him in thermal blankets. His skin was slowly turning from blue to a pale alabaster. He was handsome, in a severe, terrifying way. High cheekbones, a jawline that looked cut from the granite, and scars that told stories she didn't want to hear. One jagged line ran from his ear down his neck, disappearing under the collar. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, the wind died down. Sarah sat in the armchair, the gun on her lap, watching him. She had just saved a man who had been shot and left for dead in the middle of nowhere. Logic dictated he was a criminal. Compassion dictated he was a human being. A low groan broke the silence. Sarah sat up straighter, her hand resting on the cig. The man's eyes opened. They weren't brown or blue. They were grey, the colour of the storm outside. He didn't blink. He didn't look confused. His gaze snapped to hers, then to the gun in her lap, then to his bandaged side. "You have steady hands," he rasped. His voice was like gravel grinding together. The accent was thick Russian, maybe Ukrainian. "I was a nurse," Sarah said, keeping her voice level. "You were freezing to death, and you've been shot." "I am aware." He tried to sit up, but grimaced and fell back. "Where am I?" "Silverton, my cabin." He closed his eyes for a moment. Processing. "Did anyone see me?" "Just the elk, and they aren't talking." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You should not have opened the door. Devushka. I wasn't going to let you die on my porch. Death would have been safer for you." He looked at her again, and this time, the intensity of his gaze made her shiver, despite the fire. "My name is Nikolai." "Sarah." "Sarah." He tested the name. Rolling the R. "Do you have a phone?" "Landline is down. Cell towers are likely frozen. We're cut off until the plows come through. Probably tomorrow afternoon." Nikolai cursed softly in his native tongue. He looked at the window, black against the night. "They will track the car. They will find the tire marks before the snow covers them completely. Men who do not care that you are a nurse." He looked at her, his expression hardening. "You have a weapon." She tapped the cig. "I know how to use it, too." "Good." He reached out a hand. "Give it to me." Sarah laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Not a chance." Nikolai stared at her, assessing. He seemed to respect the refusal. "Then keep it close. If you see headlights, you wake me. Do not open the door again. Not for anyone. Not even the police." "Why are you a fugitive?" "I am a businessman," he said, the lie smooth as silk. "And I have very aggressive competitors." Sarah didn't believe him for a second. "Businessmen don't get shot and dumped in the Rockies. In my line of work, hostile takeovers are quite literal." He closed his eyes, exhaustion finally claiming him. "Thank you. Sarah, I will repay this debt. Just don't bleed on my rug," she muttered. She didn't sleep. She sat watching the fire, the gun heavy in her lap. She wondered who Nikolai really was. She wondered about the competitors. But mostly, she wondered why. Despite the danger radiating off him like heat waves, she felt a strange, magnetic pull toward the man on her floor. It was the calm before the avalanche. Dawn broke with a deceptive beauty. The sun crested over the peaks, turning the miles of untouched snow into a blinding sheet of diamonds. The storm had passed, leaving the world still and frozen. Sarah stood at the kitchen island, brewing coffee. The smell of dark roast filled the small cabin, a comforting scent that clashed with the knot of anxiety in her stomach. Nikolai was awake. He had managed to drag himself onto the sofa. He was sitting up, inspecting her stitching on his side. He had put his dress shirt back on, though it was ruined, leaving the buttons undone. The contrast between the domestic setting the plaid blankets, the steaming mug and the bruised, battered man was jarring. "You missed a spot," he said, pointing to a small laceration on his arm she hadn't treated. "I prioritized the hole in your gut," Sarah replied, handing him a mug. "Black, no sugar." "Perfect." He took a sip, his grey eyes tracking her movement. "You live here alone. It is defensible, but isolated." "That was the point." "Isolation is a luxury," Nikolai murmured, "until it becomes a cage." He tried to stand, bracing himself on the armrest. Sarah moved instinctively to help him, but he held up a hand. "I must stand. I need to see the perimeter." He limped to the window. He stood there for a long time, scanning the tree line. The tension in his shoulders was palpable. He looked like a caged tiger, wounded, but still lethal. "My car," he said. "It is in the ravine, 2 miles east. I crashed." "I figured." "My phone is in it. It has an encrypted locator. So your people are coming, or my enemies. It depends on who hacks the signal first." He turned to her. "Sarah, you must leave. Take your snowmobile, I saw it in the shed. Go to the town. I can't just leave you here. If Bratva finds me, they will extract me. If the Volkov dissidents find me, they will burn this cabin to the ground with us inside." Bratva, the Brotherhood, the Russian mob. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. She had suspected, but hearing it said aloud was different. It turned her suspicion into a death sentence. "You're the boss," she whispered. It wasn't a question. "I am the Pakan," Nikolai corrected. "The head. And right now, there is a coup." Sarah set her mug down. Her hands were trembling. "I need to get my keys." "Yes. Go." She turned to the hallway, grabbing her parka. But as she reached for the door handle, a sound stopped her. A low drone, distant but growing louder. It wasn't a car. It was too rhythmic. "Chopper," Nikolai said, his voice dropping an octave. He moved away from the window, pressing his back against the wall. "Get down!" Sarah dropped to the floor. Through the high windows, she saw a dark shape cut across the blue sky. A black helicopter, flying low, skimming the treetops. It circled the cabin once, then twice. "Is it yours?" she asked, her voice shaking. Nikolai peered through the edge of the curtain. No markings, private charter. He checked the magazine of the pistol she had refused to give him. He must have swiped it when she was making coffee. "Hey, I borrowed it," he said calmly. "It is a Sig Sauer, good balance, but only 10 rounds. We need more. I don't have an armory. I have a shotgun in the closet. Get it." The helicopter hovered, the downdraft kicking up a blinding cloud of snow. It didn't land, the terrain was too rough. Instead, it banked and flew east, toward the ravine, toward his crashed car. "They are confirming the kill," Nikolai said. "They found the car empty. They are looking for footprints." "The snow from last night covered them," Sarah said, hoping. "They are professionals. They will use thermal imaging." Nikolai looked at her. "We have maybe 20 minutes before ground teams arrive. We cannot outrun them in the snow." He looked around the cabin, his eyes landing on the trap door to the root cellar. "Does that have an exit?" "No, it's just a pantry." "Good. It is underground. Thermal won't pick us up." He grabbed her arm. "We go down. Now. And then what?" "We wait to starve. We wait for the cavalry." Nikolai's face was grim. My head of security. Victor, he is efficient. If the beacon was active, he knows. The race is between Victor and the men who want my head. Sarah grabbed the shotgun and a box of shells. They descended into the cold, damp darkness of the root cellar. Nikolai pulled the rug over the trapdoor from below, leaving them in pitch blackness. For hours, they sat in the dark, huddled together for warmth. The smell of earth and potatoes was overwhelming. "Why are they doing this?" Sarah asked in the dark. "Power," Nikolai said simply. "My uncle, Dmitri, he believes I am too soft, because I refused to traffic in women and children. He wants the old ways back." Sarah felt a strange pang of respect. "So you're the good bad guy." "There are no good guys, Sarah. Only men who have codes, and men who do not. I have a code." He shifted, groaning in pain. Sarah reached out, finding his hand in the dark. It was large and rough. He didn't pull away. He squeezed her fingers, a surprising gesture of comfort. "If we survive this," Nikolai whispered, "your life will never be the same. You understand this?" "I think my life changed the minute I opened that door. I am sorry. Don't be. Just don't let them kill me. I would burn the world before I let them touch you." The intensity in his voice was terrifyingly sincere. Suddenly, the ground shook. A vibration traveled through the earth walls of the cellar, then another, and another. It wasn't an explosion. It was engines. Many engines. "They are here," Nikolai said. He let go of her hand and racked the slide of the pistol. They listened. The sound was immense, a deep, rumbling bass that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It wasn't a few cars. It sounded like an invasion. Doors slammed above them, heavy footsteps on the floorboards. "Clear," a voice shouted. "Sector 1 clear. Check the perimeter." The trapdoor was yanked open. Light flooded the cellar, blinding Sarah. She raised the shotgun, her finger tightening on the trigger. "Wait!" Nikolai barked. A silhouette stood in the opening, a giant of a man, bald, with a headset and an assault rifle. The man looked down, saw Nikolai, and immediately dropped to one knee, lowering his head. "Pakan," the giant said. "We have secured the mountain." Nikolai stood up, wincing but hiding the pain. He offered a hand to Sarah. "Come," he said. "It is time to meet the neighbors." Sarah climbed the ladder, emerging into her living room. She gasped. Her cozy cabin was filled with men in tactical gear, but it was when she looked out the window that her breath truly hitched. The white snow was gone, covered by black metal. Sarah Jenkins stepped onto her porch, the wood groaning under the weight of the snow and the tension of the moment. Her breath hitched, turning into a white plume in the frigid air. She had expected a car, maybe two, a getaway vehicle for the wounded man she had stitched up on her living room rug. What she saw instead was an occupation. The narrow mountain road, usually treacherous and empty this time of year, was a river of black steel, bumper to bumper, extending as far as the eye could see around the bend of the pass. Were Mercedes-Benz G-Wagons, matte black, armored. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like voids in reality. There were hundreds of them, 500 SUVs, engines idling in a low, synchronized rumble that vibrated through the soles of Sarah's boots. It wasn't just a rescue party. It was a show of force that rivaled a small nation's military. Men in tactical gear, grey urban camouflage, balaclavas, and assault rifles slung across their chests stood at attention by the vehicles. They were statues, unmoving in the biting cold, their eyes fixed on the cabin. "My God," Sarah whispered. She lowered the shotgun, realizing how ridiculous it looked against this battalion. "Who are you?" Nikolai limped out behind her. He had cleaned the blood from his face, buttoned his ruined coat, and despite the limp, he walked with the arrogance of a king surveying his kingdom. "I told you," Nikolai said, his voice raspy but commanding. "I am a businessman." A man separated himself from the formation near the lead vehicle. He was massive, a mountain of a human being with a shaved head and a scar that bisected his left eyebrow. He moved with terrifying speed for his size, crunching through the snow to the porch. "Nikolai Alexandrovich," the giant rumbled, bowing his head slightly. "We feared the worst when the beacon went dark. The battery died." "Victor," Nikolai said, dismissing the concern with a wave of his hand. "Report." "Dmitri's men have locked down the city. They have bought the police chief in Denver, but the mountains belong to us." Victor's eyes shifted to Sarah. They were cold, assessing, like a reptile deciding if something was food or a threat. And the civilian, "She is the reason I am standing," Nikolai said sharply. "She is under my protection. Do svidania to anyone who looks at her wrong." Victor nodded once, a sharp, military jerk of the chin. "Understood. We move in 5. The weather is turning again." Nikolai turned to Sarah. The adrenaline that had kept him upright was fading. She could see the grey pallor returning to his cheeks. "Sarah, get your things. Essentials only." "My things." Sarah took a step back, her hand tightening on the porch railing. "No. No way. You have your army. You have your ride. I'm staying here. I have a shift at the clinic on Tuesday." Nikolai looked at her, and for a second, the mask of the ruthless Pacan slipped. He looked genuinely regretful. "Sarah, look at them." He gestured to the army of men. "Do you think my uncle, the man who put a bullet in me, will care that you are just a nurse? You touched me. You saved me. In their eyes, you are now a collaborator. If I leave you here, you will be dead by sunset." The wind howled through the pines, punctuating his sentence. Sarah looked at the convoy, then back at her cabin, her sanctuary. She realized with a sinking heart that he was right. The anonymity she had cultivated for 5 years was gone, shattered by a single act of kindness. "I have a cat," she said stupidly. "Barnaby. Victor." Nikolai barked without looking away from her. "Find the cat." "Yes, boss." 10 minutes later, Sarah sat in the back of the lead G-Wagon. The interior smelled of rich leather and gun oil. Barnaby, her grumpy tabby, was hissing inside a travel carrier on the seat next to her. Nikolai sat opposite her, his leg extended, an IV drip administered by a combat medic who had appeared from one of the trucks hanging from the grab handle above him. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked, as the convoy began to move, a slow, serpentine beast winding down the mountain. "The Iron Estate," Nikolai said, closing his eyes. "My home. It is safe there." "Is it?" Sarah challenged. "You got shot." "I was shot because I left the estate," he murmured, his voice fading as the pain medication kicked in. "I went to a meeting I should have skipped. A peace offering. Never trust a man who brings flowers with one hand and hides the other behind his back." The drive was a blur of white snow and black asphalt. Sarah watched the world pass by through the bulletproof glass. They bypassed the main highways, taking private logging roads that Victor seemed to know by heart. Every time they passed a crossroad, 2 SUVs would peel off to block it, ensuring no one could follow. It was a military operation, and she was the cargo. As the sun began to dip below the peaks, casting long, violet shadows across the valley. They approached a massive iron gate nestled between two sheer cliffs. It opened automatically as they approached. The iron estate wasn't a house, it was a fortress, a brutalist structure of concrete and glass, cantilevered over a frozen waterfall. It looked like a Bond villain's lair, cold and imposing. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter with Rottweilers. The convoy stopped in the circular driveway. Nikolai woke with a start as the door opened. "We are here," he said. Sitting up and wincing, Sarah stepped out. The air here was thinner, sharper. She looked up at the massive structure. "Welcome to my prison," Nikolai whispered near her ear. Before she could respond, a woman in a severe grey suit came rushing out of the main doors. She had blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, and she was holding a tablet like a shield. "Nikolai," she cried, her accent American, sharp and efficient. "The board is in a panic. Stocks dropped 4 points when the rumors of your death started circulating. We need a statement." "Not now, Lydia," Nikolai growled. Leaning heavily on Victor, Lydia stopped, her eyes landing on Sarah. She looked Sarah up and down, noting the worn parka, the sturdy boots, and the cat carrier. Her lip curled in a micro-expression of distaste. "Who is this?" Lydia asked. "This is Sarah," Nikolai said, his voice hardening. "She is the only reason you still have a job. Lydia, prepare the guest wing, the master suite." Lydia's eyes widened. "The master suite. But that's adjoining yours. That is reserved for—" "Do I look like I am negotiating?" Nikolai snapped. "No, sir." Lydia tapped something on her tablet, her face returning to a mask of professional indifference. "Right away." As they walked into the cavernous foyer, with its marble floors and towering art installations, Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter. She caught Lydia watching her, and in that look, she saw something dangerous. It wasn't just jealousy, it was calculation. Sarah tightened her grip on the cat carrier. She had survived the blizzard. She had survived the gunman. But surviving the politics of the Volkov family might be the hardest thing she'd ever have to do. The master guest suite was larger than Sarah's entire cabin. It had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the frozen waterfall, a fireplace large enough to roast a pig, and a bed with sheets that felt like woven clouds. But the door locked from the outside. Sarah discovered this an hour after settling in. She had tried to leave to find the kitchen, only to find the handle immovable. When she knocked, a guard politely informed her that, for her safety, movement is restricted to the east wing. She was a prisoner, a pampered, well-fed prisoner, but a prisoner nonetheless. 2 days passed. Sarah spent them pacing the room, watching the guards patrol the grounds below, and worrying about her job at the clinic. She had no phone. Victor had confiscated it to prevent tracking, and the TV only played pre-selected movies. On the third night, the lock clicked. Sarah sat up in bed, clutching a heavy brass lamp she had moved to the nightstand. The door opened, and Nikolai walked in. He looked better. The grey pallor was gone, replaced by a healthy, if pale, complexion. He wore a black silk dressing gown, and he was moving with less of a limp. "Put the lamp down." "Sarah," he said softly, "I am not here to hurt you." "You locked me in," she accused, lowering the lamp but not letting go. "You stole my phone. I secured you," he corrected. He walked to the fireplace and threw a log on the dying embers. "Dmitri has put a bounty on my head. $5 million. Do you know what kind of people that kind of money attracts if you stepped outside this gate. You would be snatched in 10 minutes to be used as leverage against me. So I'm stuck here forever. Until I kill him, Nikolai said. The statement was so matter-of-fact, it chilled her. Once Dmitri is handled, you are free. I will give you a new identity. Money. Anywhere you want to go. And if I want to go back to my cabin, that life is dead. Sarah, I am sorry. He turned to face her. The firelight danced in his grey eyes, softening them. I came to ask a favor. A favor. You have an army of staff. I have employees. I do not have anyone I trust with this. He undid the sash of his robe, letting it fall open to reveal his chest. The bandage she had applied in the cabin was still there, but it was soaked through with fresh blood. Your doctors didn't change it. I didn't let them, Nikolai admitted. One of them. I saw him texting when he thought I was asleep. He is in the holding cells now, but I do not trust the others to be close enough to stick a needle in me or use a scalpel. Paranoia. It was the air he breathed. Sit down. Sarah sighed, her nurse's instinct overriding her anger. She fetched the medical kit she had found in the bathroom, which was better stocked than her clinic, and knelt beside him. She peeled back the dressing. The wound was angry, red around the edges, but healing. He had torn a stitch, likely from moving too much. This is going to sting, she warned, dabbing it with antiseptic. Nikolai didn't flinch. He watched her face, his gaze intense and unreadable. Why did you become a nurse? He asked suddenly. My brother, Sarah said, focusing on her hands. He was an addict, overdosed when I was 20. I couldn't save him. I thought, if I learned how to fix people, maybe I could make up for it. We all have ghosts, Nikolai said. My father was the Pakan before me. He was a cruel man. He taught me that fear is the only currency that matters. I spent my life trying to prove him wrong, trying to build a legitimate empire, shipping, tech, real estate. But you're still a gangster. I am a stabilizer. Without me, the clans go to war. Innocent people die in the crossfire. I keep the monsters on a leash, he hissed as she tightened a new stitch. You have a gentle touch, Sarah, but you are strong. I saw how you handled the shotgun. I grew up in Texas. My dad taught me to shoot before I could ride a bike. Good. He reached out, his hand covering hers. His skin was hot. You may need those skills again. The atmosphere in the room shifted. It became heavy, charged with a sudden, undeniable electricity. Sarah looked up, locking eyes with him. He was dangerous, complicated, and undoubtedly a criminal. But in the firelight, with his defenses down, he was also compelling. Nikolai, she whispered. What happens when the war is over? Then we see if there is anything left of us to save, he said. He leaned in. Sarah didn't pull away. His lips brushed hers, tentative at first, asking for permission, then firmer, tasting of scotch and danger. It was a kiss that tasted of desperation, of two people on the edge of a cliff. A sharp knock on the door shattered the moment. Nikolai pulled back instantly, the mask slamming back into place. He stood up, tying his robe tight. Enter, he barked. It was Victor. He looked grim. He didn't even glance at Sarah. Boss, we have a problem. What is it? We found the leak. It wasn't the doctor. Who? It's Lydia, Victor said. She's gone. She took the encrypted hard drives, and she disabled the perimeter sensors on her way out. Nikolai's face went white. The sensors are down. Completely. We are blind. As if on cue, the lights in the room flickered and died. The emergency sirens began to wail a low, mournful sound that echoed through the concrete fortress. "They are here," Nikolai said in the darkness. The darkness was absolute for 3 seconds before the red emergency lights bathed the room in the color of blood. "Sarah, get down!" Nikolai roared. Crack! The floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the waterfall exploded inward. Glass shards sprayed across the room like diamond shrapnel. A grappling hook clattered onto the hardwood floor, followed immediately by 2 dark shapes swinging in from the roof. Nikolai didn't hesitate. He grabbed the heavy brass lamp Sarah had held earlier and hurled it. It connected with the first intruder's head with a sickening crunch, sending him tumbling back out the window to the rocks below. The second intruder raised a silenced submachine gun. Sarah scrambled off the bed, diving behind the heavy oak dresser. Bullets chewed up the mattress where she had been sitting seconds ago. Feathers exploded into the air, drifting down in the red light like bloody snow. Bang, bang. 2 deafening shots rang out from the doorway. Victor stood there, a Desert Eagle smoking in his hand. The second intruder dropped, a hole in his chest. "We are compromised," Victor shouted over the sirens. "They are coming through the east wing and the garage. It is a full assault. Mercenaries, highly trained." "Get the car," Nikolai ordered, grabbing Sarah by the arm and hauling her up. "Plan Beta." "Beta is suicide," Victor argued. "Staying here is death. Go." Victor nodded and vanished into the hallway, firing his weapon as he went. Nikolai dragged Sarah toward the door. "Stay behind me. If I fall, you take my gun and you keep running. Do not stop. Do not look back." "I'm not leaving you," Sarah yelled, her ears ringing. "You are stubborn," Nikolai grunted, checking the hallway. "I like it." They sprinted down the corridor. The estate, once a silent palace, was now a war zone. The sound of automatic fire echoed off the marble walls. Smoke was filling the air. They reached the grand staircase. Below, in the foyer, chaos reigned. Nikolai's security team was engaged in a firefight with men wearing white winter tactical gear. The intruders were pushing forward, using flashbang grenades. "We can't go down," Sarah said, coughing in the acrid smoke. "Service elevator," Nikolai said. He kicked open a panel in the wall, revealing a hidden lift. He shoved Sarah inside and punched a code. The doors slid shut just as bullets pockmarked the wall where they had been standing. The elevator descended rapidly, bypassing the ground floor and going deep underground. "Where does this go?" Sarah asked, clutching Nikolai's arm. He was bleeding again. The exertion had ripped her fresh stitches. "The vault," he said. And the escape tunnel. The doors opened into a cold, concrete bunker. It was lined with racks of servers and shelves of gold bars, Nikolai's backup fortune. But he ignored the money. He went to a weapon rack, grabbing an assault rifle and a tactical vest. He threw a lighter vest to Sarah. "Put it on." "Nikolai, you're bleeding out," Sarah said, trying to press her hand against his side. "Adrenaline is a hell of a drug," he grimaced. "We have to make it to the tunnel exit. It comes out 3 miles away, near the old mining road. Victor will meet us there." "If he's still alive," Sarah said quietly. Nikolai paused. He looked at her, his expression fierce. "Victor is too ugly to die. Come." They ran through the tunnel. It was damp, narrow, and smelled of mold. It seemed to go on forever. Sarah's lungs burned. Every step was a battle against fear. Finally, they saw grey light ahead. The exit. They burst out into the freezing air, finding themselves in a dense thicket of pine trees. The sounds of the battle at the estate were distant now, muffled by the snow. A black SUV was waiting, engine running. "Victor!" Sarah cried out in relief. The window rolled down. It wasn't Victor. It was a man with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He held a pistol casually resting on the doorframe. "Hello, nephew," the man said. Nikolai froze. "Dmitri." "You are hard to kill," Dmitri said, stepping out of the car. 4 other men emerged from the trees, weapons raised. They were surrounded. "I burn down your house, and you scurry out of the rat hole just like I predicted. Lydia was very helpful with the blueprints." Nikolai stood in front of Sarah, shielding her with his body. He dropped his rifle. He knew when he was outgunned. "Let the girl go. Dmitri," Nikolai said calmly. "This is family business. She is nobody." Dmitri looked at Sarah. He laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "Nobody. She is the nurse who stitched you up, the one you brought into your home, the one you look at with sentiment." Dmitri raised his gun, pointing it not at Nikolai, but at Sarah's forehead. "Sentiment makes you weak. Nikolai, I think I will start by cutting out your weakness." "No." Nikolai lunged forward. Bang! The gunshot echoed through the trees, scattering a flock of crows. Sarah screamed. Nikolai fell to his knees, clutching his chest, but Dmitri didn't fire again. A look of confusion crossed the old man's face. He looked down at his own chest, where a small red flower was blooming on his white scarf. Dmitri crumpled to the ground, dead before he hit the snow. "Sector clear." A voice boomed from the tree line. Victor emerged from the woods, a smoking sniper rifle in his hands. He was battered, bleeding from a head wound, and his armor was shredded, but he was standing behind him. A dozen of Nikolai's loyal soldiers emerged from the camouflage of the snow. "I told you, boss." Victor grinned through bloody teeth. "I am too ugly to die." Nikolai let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. He slumped forward into the snow. "Nikolai." Sarah dropped beside him. He was pale, his eyes rolling back. The adrenaline had run out. His body had nothing left. "Get him in the car!" Sarah screamed at Victor. "We need a hospital, a real one. Now." Victor didn't argue. He scooped up his fallen king. As they sped away, leaving the bodies of the traitors in the snow, Sarah held Nikolai's hand, pressing her fingers against his fading pulse. "Don't you dare," she whispered fiercely. "Don't you dare die on me now. You son of a bitch!" The war for the Empire was won, but the battle for Nikolai's life had just begun. And Sarah knew, with terrifying clarity, that if he died, a part of her would die with him. She was no longer just a nurse. She was part of the family now, and the family protected its own. The drive to Denver was a blur of motion and terror. The black SUV, driven by a bleeding but stoic Victor, tore down the mountain passes at speeds that defied physics. Behind them, the remnants of the convoy, those loyal soldiers who had survived the ambush at the estate, formed a phalanx of steel, a rolling shield wall protecting their fallen king. Inside the cabin, the air was thick with the copper scent of blood. Nikolai was drifting in and out of consciousness. His hand, cold and clammy, gripped Sarah's with a desperation that broke her heart. "Sarah," he murmured, his eyes unfocused, staring at the roof of the car. "The accounts? Lydia?" "Shh," Sarah whispered, pressing a compress against his chest. "Don't talk about money. Nikolai, just breathe." She took the clean money. He wheezed, a cough racking his body that brought up flecks of red foam. "I have nothing to give you." "You have a pulse," Sarah said fiercely. her tears finally spilling over. "That's all I want. Give me that." Victor glanced in the rearview mirror, his face a mask of grim determination. "We are 10 minutes out from the sanctuary. Doctor, Sterling is prepping the OR." The sanctuary wasn't a hospital. It was a fortress disguised as a private oncology clinic in the outskirts of Denver. When they arrived, the scene from the cabin repeated itself, but with a sterile, terrifying urgency. The SUV screeched to a halt in the ambulance bay. Doors flew open, but instead of soldiers, it was a swarm of medical staff in blue scrubs. They pulled Nikolai from the car. Sarah tried to follow, but a nurse held her back. "Family only beyond this point," the nurse said automatically. "I am his family," Sarah screamed, her voice cracking. She looked at Victor. The giant stepped forward, looming over the nurse. "She is the Pacan's wife." He lied, his voice leaving no room for argument. "She goes where he goes." The nurse paled and stepped aside. Sarah ran. She ran alongside the gurney as they wheeled Nikolai through the double doors, down the blindingly white corridors. He was pale, his skin translucent under the harsh fluorescent lights. "BP is crashing 60 over 40. A doctor shouted, "Doctor! Sterling!" He was a balding man with wire-rimmed glasses and the arrogance of a god. "Get him intubated. Where is the blood bank? We need a negative. Stat." They reached the operating theatre. Sterling turned to Sarah. "You stay here." "He has a history of reaction to anesthesia," Sarah blurted out, her medical training kicking in through the panic. "And he's dehydrated. You need to adjust the dosage or you'll stop his heart." Sterling sneered. "I have treated the Volkov family for 20 years. Young lady, I think I know. He was stuck in a root cellar for 2 days." Sarah grabbed the doctor's scrub top. "He is hypovolemic and septic. If you give him the standard dose, you kill him. Do you want to explain to that army outside why the boss is dead?" Sterling stared at her. He looked at the fire in her eyes, then at the vitals monitor. He swallowed hard. "Adjust the lidocaine." Sterling barked at the anesthesiologist. "Cut the propofol by half." He looked at Sarah. "Wait outside." The doors swung shut, severing her from him. The silence that followed was worse than the gunfire. Sarah collapsed into a plastic chair in the waiting room. Her clothes were stained with Nikolai's blood. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. Victor sat opposite her. He had refused medical attention for his head wound, simply wrapping a bandage around it. He sat like a stone golem, his assault rifle resting across his knees, staring at the elevator doors. "He is strong," Victor said after an hour of silence. "He survived the Gulag when he was 16. He survived the car bomb in Moscow in 09. He will survive this." "He thinks he's broke," Sarah said quietly. "He said Lydia took the clean money." Victor's jaw tightened. "Lydia is a rat. Rats eat the grain and leave the filth. She emptied the operational accounts, the liquid assets. It is a significant blow. The empire runs on cash flow. Without it, the wolves will come." "Let them come," Sarah said, surprised by the venom in her own voice. "We'll handle them." Victor looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since the cabin. A slow, respectful nod followed. "You speak like a Volkov." Hours turned into an eternity. The sun rose and set. Sarah drank stale coffee and paced. She watched the news on the mounted TV reports of a gang-related shootout at a remote estate, the police baffled by the military precision of the attack. Finally, at 4 a.m., the doors opened. "Doctor." Sterling walked out. He looked exhausted. He pulled off his surgical cap. Sarah stood up, her heart hammering against her ribs. "He made it," Sterling said. Sarah let out a sob, her legs giving way. Victor caught her before she hit the floor. "It was close," Sterling admitted, wiping his glasses. "The sepsis was setting in, and you were right about the anesthesia." His heart fluttered twice. If we had given him the full dose. He trailed off, looking at Sarah with a grudging respect. "You saved his life. Again. Can I see him?" "He is in the ICU. He will be out for a few days. Coma induced to let the body heal. Go. Sit with him. He seems to sense when you are there." Sarah walked into the ICU room. It was dimly lit, filled with the rhythmic beeping of machinery. Nikolai lay in the bed, a tangle of tubes and wires connecting him to the world of the living. He looked small without his suit, without his bravado. Just a man. She pulled a chair to the bedside. She took his hand, careful of the IV lines. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere. For 3 days." She didn't leave. She slept in the chair. She ate whatever Victor brought her. She talked to Nikolai, reading him the news, telling him stories about her childhood in Texas, about the elk in the mountains, about anything to keep his mind anchored to reality. On the 4th morning, the rhythm of his breathing changed. Sarah woke with a start. Nikolai's eyes were open. They were glassy, drugged, but they were looking at her. He tried to speak, but the ventilator tube stopped him. He panicked, his heart rate spiking on the monitor. "Shh, shh," Sarah soothed, stroking his hair. "You're safe. You're in Denver. The tube has to stay for a bit. Just breathe." He stared at her, his grey eyes searching her face. He squeezed her hand weakly. Later that day, after they extubated him, his voice was a raw whisper. "Sarah, I'm here. Why?" He coughed, wincing in pain. "Why stay? I told you the money is gone." "You idiot," Sarah said, pouring him a cup of ice chips. "Do you think I dragged you through a blizzard for a paycheck? I have enemies," he rasped. "More now. I cannot pay the armies. I cannot pay the bribes. The vultures. They will circle. Then we shoot the vultures," Sarah said calmly. Nikolai looked at her. A weak, crooked smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You are terrifying. I learned from the best. Victor. He is outside. He hasn't slept in 4 days either. He's been coordinating with your captains. He says the loyalty is holding, for now. But they need to see you." "They need to see strength," Nikolai corrected. He tried to sit up, groaning. "Help me up." "Absolutely not. You have 40 stitches in your chest." "Sarah." His voice hardened, the tone of the Pakan returning. "If I do not show my face, the rumors will kill what is left of my kingdom. Help me up." Sarah hesitated. She knew he was right. In his world, weakness was a death sentence. "Fine," she said. "But if you rip those stitches, I will sedate you myself." She helped him sit up. She helped him shave with a basin of water. Victor brought in a fresh suit, God knows where he got it, and they dressed him, covering the bandages and the tubes. He sat in a wheelchair, looking like death warmed over, but upright. "Wheel me to the window," Nikolai ordered. The ICU was on the 4th floor, overlooking the parking lot. Sarah pushed the chair to the glass. Down below, the parking lot was full, not with cars, with men. Hundreds of them. The soldiers from the SUVs, the captains from the city. They stood in formation, silent, waiting. They had been there for days, a vigil of black coats in the snow. Nikolai raised his hand, pressing it against the glass. Below, a ripple went through the crowd. They saw him. 500 men raised their fists in unison, a silent salute, a pledge of allegiance that money couldn't buy. Nikolai let out a breath he had been holding. He looked up at Sarah. "Maybe," he whispered. "We are not so poor, after all." "No," Sarah said, resting her hand on his shoulder. "I think you're the richest man in Colorado." But as Nikolai looked at his army, his eyes darkened. He wasn't looking at the loyalty. He was looking at the future. "Lydia is still out there," he murmured, "and she knows everything. The codes, the safe houses, the routes." "So what do we do?" Sarah asked. Nikolai turned his head, kissing her hand. The gesture was tender, but his eyes were cold steel. "We hunt." 6 months later, the aspen twilight was purple and gold, casting long shadows across the terrace of the glass peak. It was a monstrosity of modern architecture, a fortress of steel and reinforced glass perched on a cliff edge that made the iron estate look like a cottage. Sarah Jenkins, no. Sarah Volkov stood at the railing, sipping champagne. She wore a backless emerald gown that cost more than her nursing school tuition. Her hair, once messy and practical, was styled in sleek waves, but her eyes were the same. Watchful, alert. She heard the footsteps before she saw him. Nikolai walked onto the terrace. He moved with a predatory grace now, the limp from the gunshot wound entirely gone. He wore a tuxedo, the bow tie undone, hanging loose around his neck. "The guests are asking for the hostess," he said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling her scent. "Let them wait," Sarah said, leaning back into him. "Senator Reynolds is boring me. He keeps trying to ask about the import-export logistics." "Reynolds is a fool," Nikolai murmured. "But his vote on the zoning committee is useful. Be nice to him for another hour, and I will let you shoot clay pigeons off the roof tomorrow. Promise. I never break a promise to you. Dusha moja." Sarah turned in his arms. He looked healthy. Better than healthy. He looked powerful. The last 6 months had been a whirlwind of violence and reconstruction. They hadn't just hunted Lydia. They had obliterated the network that supported her. Victor had found her in a penthouse in Zurich, trying to sell the encrypted files to the Albanian mob. Victor didn't kill her. That wasn't the Volkov way. He had simply retrieved the files, emptied the accounts back into Nikolai's control, and left her there with the Albanians, informing them that she had tried to sell them fake data. The problem sorted itself out. With the traitor gone and the war chest recovered, Nikolai had solidified his grip. But things had changed. He had changed. He had kept his word. He had legitimized 50% of the business. The drug routes were gone, replaced by high-end cybersecurity contracts and real estate development. He was still a gangster, still dangerous, but he was building a legacy that didn't require looking over his shoulder every second. And Sarah, she wasn't just the nurse anymore. She was the gatekeeper. She managed the charitable foundation that washed the reputation of the family. She sat in meetings. She vetted the associates. She had learned that healing people and controlling people weren't so different. Both required knowing where the pressure points were. "You are thinking too loud," Nikolai said, tracing the line of her jaw with his thumb. "I was thinking about the cabin," she admitted. "It's snowing tonight. Just like that night. Do you miss it?" The silence. "Sometimes," Sarah said, honest. "But then I remember I was freezing and lonely. And now I'm warm She smiled, and definitely not lonely. Nikolai reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box. "I know we did the courthouse thing for legal reasons," he said, his voice dropping to that husky timbre that still made her knees weak. "To keep you from testifying, to get the spousal privilege. It was very romantic," Sarah teased, "signing papers in a basement next to a bail bondsman." "I want to do it right," Nikolai said. He opened the box. Inside wasn't a diamond. It was a ring made of dark, meteoric iron, with a single band of jagged platinum running through it. It looked like a mountain range. It looked like a scar. "My mother's ring," Nikolai said. "She told me to give it to the woman who could survive the storm. I waited 40 years. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. She held out her hand. Nikolai slid the ring onto her finger. It was heavy. It felt like an anchor. "I love you, Nikolai," she whispered. "I worship you." "Sarah," he replied. He kissed her, deep and slow, oblivious to the party inside, oblivious to the guards watching from the perimeter. Suddenly, a low rumble shook the glass beneath their feet. Sarah pulled back, her hand instinctively going to the small pistol strapped to her thigh under the gown. Old habits died hard. "Relax," Nikolai said, smiling against her lips. "Look down." Sarah looked over the railing. Winding up the long, heated driveway of the glass peak was a convoy. 500 black SUVs. They weren't coming for war. They were coming for the celebration, the annual shareholders' meeting, as Nikolai called it, the gathering of the clans. But this time, the lead car wasn't Nikolai's. It was pink. Sarah burst out laughing. "You didn't. I told you." Nikolai grinned, looking down at the customized G-Wagon. "I bought it for you. Victor was very upset about the paint job. He said it intimidates no one. I told him he was wrong. It's hideous." Sarah laughed, wiping a tear. "I love it. Happy anniversary." "Sarah." They stood there, the king and queen of the Rockies, watching their Iron Legion assemble below. The snow began to fall harder, swirling around the glass tower. Sarah thought back to that night in the cabin. The fear, the cold, the stranger bleeding on her rug. She had opened the door to a monster and found a man. She had sheltered a storm and found a home. "Shall we go down?" Nikolai offered his arm. "Your army awaits." Sarah took his arm, the iron ring cold and solid against her skin. She looked at the convoy, then back at the man who would burn the world for her. "Let's go," she said. "I think Victor needs to see me drive that pink tank." They walked back inside, leaving the cold behind, stepping into the warmth and the light, ready to rule the world they had built from the ashes of the snow. What a ride, right from a lonely cabin in a blizzard to the top of a criminal empire. Sarah and Nikolai's story proves that sometimes the most dangerous choices lead to the greatest destinies. Who knew a single act of kindness could launch a war and build a kingdom